Hello, and welcome to the Dissident Mama podcast. Today, my guest is Shayne Swenson. Swenson is a professional Orthodox iconographer and painter living in rural Washington state. He specializes in creating iconography from several different periods and historic Orthodox locales, both Eastern and Western. In addition to iconography, Swenson is also involved in the study and practice of academic oil painting, with an emphasis on utilizing the techniques of the old masters, again, from both East and West. He has been married for nearly 2 decades and has 5 children, 1 German Shepherd and 1 17-pound cat. Welcome, Shayne.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So I had a cat once that was 13 pounds, and that was a pretty big cat. What's the deal?
I don't know. We got this cat on, my wife found it on Facebook, typically. And yeah, they were just giving away kittens here. I live in like you said in the bio, I live in a pretty rural part of Eastern Washington. So there's kittens, barn cats and stuff all over the place. And we had a cat a couple years ago and he disappeared. Was probably, the coyotes got him or something unfortunate. My daughters wanted a cat, so my wife got this cat last summer, and he was a normal sized kitten. About 5-6 months, I take him into the vet to get all the shots and stuff, and he's already pretty big. And I the vet's like, okay, looking at him or whatever, and she was like, well, how old is he? I said, he's 5 months, and she went, no, that's not possible. And so she's doing the exam, and then she looks at his teeth, and she was like, oh my gosh, he's 5 months old. And so she then proceeds to tell me he's probably going to grow to be 20-25 pounds. At this point, he's 17 pounds and he's about 8 months old. So
that's crazy. We may have to do a whole podcast on large cats. That's fascinating.
I love large cats. I mean, I have a German Shepherd too, but my cat he's actually asleep over there. He's insane. He's huge and, sassy like all cats. But anyway.
Yes. Well, I have a German Shepherd too, so there's another thing we align on. So there you go. All right, we're going to dive into who you are, and find out about your art. And I know a little bit about art. I'm not totally ignorant of it. My roommate in college was an artist, so
nice.
I kind of know some things, but top level. So you're going to educate me and all of us all. How did you get into art? What's your inspiration, training? Is it something you were good at when you were little and just kept it going, or something you came to late in life, or what?
Well, it wasn't really art. I mean, I don't know. It wasn't something I was like hyper obsessive about. I was actually super into music. I played guitar when I was in school or whatever. I did get in trouble a lot for drawing on my notebooks and drawing when I should have been paying attention in class. And I always had a good foundation. I was always better than average as far as that goes. And then, I did some time in the US military. And then after that, I was sort of aimless. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And my MOS in the military was the Signal Corps, and it just wasn't anything I really wanted to do. It was not my thing. And so after a semester in college, wasting all of that financial aid, screwing around and partying, I made my way up to a bigger area. And I just one day was like, I had a couple tattoos at that point, from being, right after I got out of the military. And I was like, I could probably be a tattoo artist. I don't know. It just kind of struck me as that's something I could do. And so I started getting tattooed more, and then made friends with the guy that was doing my tattoos. This was, 2004 maybe. And then I sort of fell into that. And that was basically the way I got into doing art professionally. And that's something that I've done now for almost 20 years. It's a huge scandal to some Orthodox Christians, which I understand. I try to keep my iconography vocation and that very separate. And it's tattooing is definitely something that I'm working my way out of, but it's definitely not something I've been able to just hang up, because I have 5 children, and my my spiritual father confessor has sort of advised me not to just walk away from it so quickly, I guess. So anyway, yeah, I'm working my way out of that and into doing iconography more full time, I guess you could say, even though I do paint full time. But anyway, that's a whole other conversation. But that's basically how I got into doing art. I have no formal education. I didn't go to some, art school. I didn't do any of that. I started out in the trenches doing little tattoos, and then I worked my way up to doing specialty tattoos. And when I became Orthodox is when I got really serious about, I always painted, but when I got Orthodox, when I became Orthodox, I got serious about, more serious about art. And that was probably about 8 years, almost 9 years ago, I guess. And obviously, if you're an artist and you come into Orthodoxy, iconography is going to be something that you're drawn to. I don't have to explain that. Just like if you're a singer or something, you're going to be drawn to the chanting. That's just how it goes. So, and I think that's a really good thing. I think, I think that God puts those desires or those talents inside of you to be used and cultivated within the context of the church. And so, for all of my shortcomings as a tattooer, I'm hoping that I'm working my way up the ladder via my iconography. So anyway, I got into it that way. It wasn't the iconography that drew me to Orthodoxy per se. It was, frankly, that was kind of an afterthought. I was drawn to Orthodoxy primarily from we can get into this if you want, but more of the philosophical stuff, I guess. I was having a really hard time being an unbeliever or an atheist. So that, like I said, that's a whole other thing we can talk about. But as far as the art goes, I learned how to draw through tattooing. And if there's anybody that watches this that is a tattooer, they can definitely relate. It's something it's sort of like when you go to, when I say art school, I don't mean like an atelier. An atelier is different than an art school. An atelier is where you go to practically learn how to paint or draw, and you use academic techniques that have been handed down from all these different actual art schools, all the way back to the old masters. That's how, it's almost like an apprenticeship. That's how art training is done. Modern art, like when the modern art thing happened, that's when you get all these stupid art schools where people, I don't know, I don't even really follow that stuff. It's just so stupid. But where anyone can be an artist, you express yourself and all that stuff. It's just stupid. That's not art. That's a symptom of the decline, in my opinion. But anyway, tattooing is sort of like, you have to perform. You have to, what you're doing is on demand. So if someone comes in and they say, hey, I want to get such and such, you have to draw that. And it's been, when I explain to people how I picked iconography up so quickly, it's because of tattooing. It's quite literally just because I was a tattooer so long. My entire job was either back engineering a piece of art and reinterpreting it or translating it into a tattoo, or taking an image someone brought me and copying it in that context. And so when it comes to iconography, you have these boundaries, right? And that's the tradition. You have these boundaries. Now the boundaries might be over here and over here, over here and over here. But you can be creative within these boundaries. Well, I thrive in that. And that's sort of how tattooing is in a lot of ways. There's certain rules you can't break, or else the tattoo doesn't age well, or it doesn't, it's just, there's traditions, I guess you could say, within tattooing. And that just, iconography, I fell into it very easily. And I picked it up rather quickly. I haven't really trained under anybody. There's a gentleman, a really good friend of mine, is a Serbian gentleman who providentially is living in the States and is about 3 hours away painting this beautiful Antiochian church in Yakima. He's a very good friend of mine. He has poured out he's a master iconographer from Serbia. Like, he paints murals and fresco. He painted a fresco in one of the chapels at St. Catherine's in Mount Sinai. So he would be very upset if I was singing his praises. If he heard me singing his praises, he's a very humble man, but I owe him a lot. I have him on speed dial. If I have any issues, he's available. And I truly believe God put him into my life for that. But as far as like formal training or like workshops, I've never really done any of that. And it's all been because of tattooing is why I I was able to do this. So kind of long-winded, but that's a roundabout way of explaining how I got to where I am.
So I want to talk about a lot of the things you brought up, but let's get back to tattooing. You know, a lot of
Mhm.
people may not be Christian listening to this podcast.
Right.
There's probably a few people out there. What's the deal? Why would somebody say a tattoo maybe isn't something a Christian gets, especially from an Orthodox worldview? You know, bodies are temples, but,
Right.
you know, maybe it's vanity, or, you know, bodies are a living sacrifice, and art is a way to glorify God. Where do you
Right.
come down, and how do you balance that? And yeah, that's the question for now.
So I get probably 10 or more messages on social media a month from people asking me to give them guidance or advice on this topic. And I tell every single one of them that I'm not the guy to ask, just because it's a very gray area. Because first off, I'm not going to be like, well, they do tattoos in Jerusalem, or the Copts did that. It's like, okay, that's a very specific historic context in which that was done, and it has nothing to do with modern tattooing. That being said, the biblical mandates people throw out in Leviticus and all this
Leviticus, right?
is totally out of context, has nothing to do with modern tattooing. Modern tattooing is along the lines of, I see it sort of along the lines of like cosmetic surgery. I mean, that's not a cope, I promise. That's just from someone who's done it for a long time. That's quite literally where it lines up. So in some instances, is it a sin to get cosmetic surgery? Well, I say a lot of the times it's probably not. I wouldn't call it a sin, but it's probably not spiritually fruitful to be getting cosmetic surgery. You know, same with a tattoo. I hate to be that guy, because that's how I make part of my living. I'm not a tattoo evangelist, but I'm definitely not anti-tattoo. It's just something that I feel like is a gray area, and it's a pastoral issue that is difficult to navigate. And I've heard multiple different things from multiple different priests. My spiritual father is Tikhon. I think a lot of people know that. And I'll just explain to you what he told me when I brought this to him. And as far as someone who does tattoos, this was the guidance he gave me in a nutshell. Is tattooing a sin? Yes and no. It can be. Inherently, it's not, but it can be. It's one of those things. And you have to take a look at things you have to take a look at each situation, okay? Anyone that hits me up and wants me to tattoo, I've had tons of people ask me to tattoo icons on them, and that is a huge no-no. Don't ever get a tattoo of an icon, ever. That's not okay. I hate to use the term misappropriation or appropriating Orthodox, whatever, but that's the language. That's not really the right context. And I think us as Westerners and as Americans, we're so exposed to images all the time. Like, images are cheap. You can get on your phone, you can look at a pretty lady, you can look at a picture of a beautiful cathedral. Imagery is cheap, whereas back in the old days, imagery wasn't cheap. You had to hire an artisan to look at an image, okay? We didn't have photographs, we couldn't just print these icons and cheaply tape them or paste them to wood. Like, you couldn't do that. And so images came with a price, and people valued them more. Well, I mean, our whole entire society is based around imagery and advertising and all the stupid stuff that comes with that. Tattooing is sort of partly a product of that. And I don't know. When it comes to icons and tattooing, that's just not the right context for an icon. And I argued with a guy about it, not like in an angry way. We just kind of had a back and forth, and he's trying to explain how the body is a temple and all that. And you know, that's just not, in my opinion, this is all just my opinion. That's not really correct in this aspect. And so anyone that has a tattoo of an icon, I'm not judging you or saying that you're a terrible person. It's just a personal thing. In order to paint iconography that goes inside of a church that's used liturgically, or used in the church in a official manner or whatever, you generally have to get the blessing of the bishop at some point. And if I already have enough problems with some people knowing that I mean, I've heard, not directly, but I've heard from a few clergy that there have been other clergy that have said that my iconography is an abomination because I'm a tattoo artist. Now that's a really extreme view. And I'm friends with some I don't hang around with lefty clergy, okay, or whatever you want to call it. That's
Life's
not me.
too short.
Yeah, that's not my thing. And what I just said about my iconography being an abomination, that's like a really extreme, that came from like this old codger that, it was just a dumb thing for him to say. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, I can ramble about the tattoos forever, but as far as it goes pastorally, I don't give advice on that because I'm not a priest. Right. So I just tell everybody, hey man, even though I do tattoos, talk to your priest. Yeah. Really evaluate why you're doing it. If you want to get an Orthodox cross or something, I don't think that's a huge deal. I don't think people should be getting like the great schema and all that, because that's not that having that image on something requires, there's a responsibility that comes with toting that image around. And what I was saying about, I kind of got sidetracked, but what I was saying about being Westerners or being Americans and being so desensitized to the importance of symbols and imagery, that falls into that. And I'm guilty of it too. I like all the Orthodox stuff, kitsch or whatever it's called. I like that stuff. It appeals to me. It's cool. I've always been into black metal, so it kind of went like that when I discovered schema monks and stuff. Like it appealed to me like it does thousands of other people. But being Orthodox a while now and really really thinking about this topic, I don't think people should get that kind of stuff tattooed on them. I don't think you should get icons tattooed on you. And I really think you need to think very carefully about what I mean, that's such a dad thing to say, but like really think about it's permanent, you know what I mean? That's like a really dad thing to say, but I am a dad, so I guess there's no big deal, but
so
talk to your
yeah, that's one of the great things about being Orthodox. Pastoral care, go over there,
exactly.
not my thing. So
you don't have to have an opinion on everything.
That's right.
So I've learned that the hard way.
So it's funny. I kind of did some piercings back in the day when I was wild, but I never got tattoos. And this was, I was mostly wild in the 90s, and it was really up and coming then. And my art school roommate had tats. Most of the people I know had them. And I think back of the tattoos I wanted to get. Oh my goodness. I was a feminist, so I kind of wanted a feminist holding a globe, Mother Earth kind of stuff. I was really into the Grateful Dead and Fish. I thought about all sorts of tattoos like that. I'm like, wow. So do you have any tattoos you regret?
I have quite a few tattoos. I have some very taboo tattoos that I won't show, that I regret, with taboo things on them. I mean, I think me and my wife talk about this all the time, because my obviously being the wife of a tattoo artist, she has a ton of tattoos. We actually were in Costco the other day, and so when I got my neck tattoo, this was a long time ago, it was edgy when I had my neck and hands tattooed. It was like, and I used to have, I don't know, I've had a bunch of these look all prison sketchy because I've had a bunch of laser removal done. I actually used to be in the St. Stephen's course, Antiochian House of Studies, years ago. And so long story there, but I started to get some tattoos removed because I was in a situation where the priest I had at the time was trying to like get me to become a deacon. And so long story there, I don't want to go into it, but so I've had a bunch of laser removal done. But when I had first gotten my neck tattooed for several years, that was like, people would stare at you and treat you different, and being someone who's always been drawn to the transgressive, that was kind of cool. Well, now, I was in Costco, and like every 40 something soccer mom, a half sleeve, and there's just a ton of people with trashy tattoos. And my tattoos are so old now that I just look like, all these other people now, which is fine. I'm almost 41. I don't really care about any of that anymore. But it is very interesting to hear some of the things from younger, I guess you could say, dissident right or right-wing people, and how anti-tattoo they are and anti this and anti that. And to see people like me or people I know in the tattoo industry who hold my views or who are Orthodox, and to play this like balancing on the razor's edge where we sort of work in this like very, I mean, I wouldn't call it progressive really. It kind of is, but the culture of tattooing in America is not progressive at all. I mean, I can't even begin to explain why that is, because I don't want to, I just don't want to go into that. But it's just take my word for it. It's not liberal or progressive in any way. Tattooing might be, but I don't know. Seeing all these people now, all these normie people with tattoos, it's so powerfully ironic to sit back and go, I think it's illustrative of how the counterculture became the man. I mean, that's a great illustration of that, how these people who used to be the counterculture, however you want to define that, have now become the norm. I don't stand out in Costco anymore. Like I walk in there, I'm just like another idiot buying 9,000 pounds of dog food and coconut water.
Right.
And that's a good thing in some ways, I guess, because when you get older, you kind of want to blend in. You don't want to stand out. But in other ways, I wish I wouldn't. I hate to say it, it's echoing throughout eternity, but I really wish I wouldn't have got my hands and neck tattooed. So if anyone's listening to this and considering doing that, don't get your hands and neck tattooed. That should be my epitaph on my grave. Don't get your hands. So anyway.
Now, Father Turbo Qualls is a tattoo artist or dabbled in it or something?
Yeah, he was. I don't really know him too well. Me and him kind of butted heads a little bit a few years ago. We both kind of, I think we both have come around to it's odd. I haven't really chatted with him. I've talked to him a couple times. We definitely butted heads on some things several years ago, but I don't think we would anymore. I think he went through the whole BLM thing, and if you want to get into it, I sort of went through the whole alt-right thing, and I think it was very interesting recently to hear him. He was on Mike Witkoff's YouTube channel, and I was blown away. I actually got his number from Tikhon. I've been meaning to chat with him because
they're friends, right?
Tattoo industry, and hearing his story, I really related to a lot of it. Going through, we just went down different paths and then sort of ended up in the same place as far as and stuff goes. But anyway,
I definitely went up
now, but he definitely same industry. So
I want to talk about how you came to Orthodoxy and your path, but a little bit more about iconography. What are the rules? I mean, you kind of said there are some, but there aren't. So there's this kind of happy medium where you're flourishing. Are you supposed to study under somebody? Is that one of those things in Orthodoxy where there's like, oh, there's really not a rule? That happens a lot within Orthodoxy. So tell us about that. Maybe if you get pushback that you think is valid, or if you're just like, it is what it is. I'm making beautiful icons. Get over it.
Right. I get a lot of pushback. But so let me back up a little bit. Anybody that puts anything to create out there, you'll get pushback from somebody. So I get negative comments every single day, all day, that I just go through and delete. I don't really even engage with people, but I mean, so there are rules and there aren't rules per se. There's a mythology that's pushed in Orthodoxy that is not really in keeping with the traditions with an S. It's plural. Okay. Iconography has several schools or periods or styles, whatever you want to call it, that are related to, the geographic area in which the iconography developed. Okay. Now it all has its roots in, I guess, Byzantine. It's, the Byzantine aesthetic or whatever. But as each culture, like Russia, for example, has all these different schools, there's Novgorod, there's all these different styles of iconography that are very, they're all tethered to one iconographic tradition, and they all have sort of their own canons. But there's no like overarching macro like canons of iconography. Like you hear people talk about this on the internet, and it's not really a thing. I mean, there are canons, but there, as far as a macro guideline or macro rules about iconography, the only thing we have is like the Seventh Ecumenical Council. So I'm sure somebody Orthodox listening to this will say, oh, that's not true. I read in this book, historically speaking, it's the Seventh Ecumenical Council. Now, when you get into certain areas of the world and certain time periods, there absolutely are rules or guidelines, but it's not as rigid as a lot of people think. Like at the parish level, if you go into a parish, you'll hear things like, if it's not, these are all things I've heard in person. If it's not egg tempera, it's not an icon, not a real icon. That's one that you hear all the time. It's not a real icon. It usually always boils down to whatever I don't like is not a real icon. Okay. So I had a deacon, a very nice guy, but he just didn't really know what he was talking about. Try to tell me that an icon painted in oil or acrylic wasn't a real icon. And my rebuttal was, okay, well, probably the most venerated icon in the West is an icon that comes from Hawaii that pours myrrh out of it. And it's the medium is printer ink on paper that's glued with synthetic glue to a piece of plywood, So I don't really buy into a lot of this is one aspect of it. I don't buy into a lot of the rigidity as far as it has to be this way and these are the rules. That's just simply not true. Is there a tradition? Absolutely. There is no room for creativity as far as I'm just going to do my own thing.
Right.
The way I explain it is this: we have the liturgy. You can go to the liturgy in Georgia, Florida. What state are you in?
North Carolina.
North Carolina. I lived in Augusta, Georgia. So everyone from the South that I talk to, I immediately just think of Augusta, Georgia. Anyway. North Carolina, you go to a liturgy. I go to one here in Washington. You go to a liturgy in, Greece or wherever. Generally, we're all experiencing the same liturgy. It might be a different language, but it's the liturgy of St. John Chrysostom or St. Basil. But the creativity comes into it when you break it down to specific priests, okay? And they chant the liturgy. They're all saying the same words, but you're going to hear it differently in each one of those liturgies because it's a different human being made in the image of God that is chanting. They're trying to chant, and they should be at least, trying to chant within the tradition, the way that they were shown or the way that they learned. And they're definitely, if they're a good priest, not trying to do violence to the tradition or express themselves by singing it a certain way. That's not what they're doing. But just boil down to the fact that they're a human being, and each person is individual. It's going to be expressed in a different way. That's the best way to think about iconography. There is a tradition, and they're not these rigid rules that we have written down where you can't do this, you can't do this, you can do this. I shouldn't say that. There are some schools you can go to that do that, but that's just not really, like I said earlier, not really in keeping with historically the way iconography was handed down. But the creativity comes into it because you just can't help not be creative when you paint an icon, because me and you could sit down and paint the exact same icon from the same, like I have, the Hawaiian, I'm doing a copy of the Hawaiian Iran icon right here. It's like halfway done. I'm trying to follow it as close as I can to the prototype, the actual prototype. I have myrrh, a big bottle of myrrh from that icon that I'm going to anoint it with. And, there's all this stuff I'm going to do to try and get it as close to the real thing as I can, but it's not going to look exactly like that icon because I'm not the one who painted that icon. So there's going to be a creative element that's there, but that's a secondary thing. Okay. And that's not something we need to focus on. When people focus on being creative, that's when you run into problems, and that's when you start getting into non-canonical icons, and the line between bad aesthetics and bad theology starts to get a little blurry. So just like everything in Orthodoxy, it's really difficult to nail down and explain, but and there's a million different opinions about it. You have someone like someone who I respect, who I disagree with in a lot of ways, but Photios Contoglou, who he is? Have you ever heard of him? Mm-mm. He's probably the single most, I'd say one of the single most or one of the most important iconographers of the 20th century. He is basically almost single-handedly responsible for reinvigorating the Byzantine or Hellenic iconographic tradition. Greek iconography was very Western way back in the day, just as Russian iconography was. But right now we're really seeing a revival of Cretan iconography. I mean, traditional, when you think of a Byzantine icon, that we're seeing a revival of that. I'm trying to keep things in terms that non-Orthodox people will.
Yeah.
I realize you have a broader audience than just Orthodox. So, but anyway, yeah, just like everything in Orthodoxy, there are rules, and they are very hard to nail down and define. But if you're living within the life of the church and you approach it with humility, there's a good chance you're not going to cross those lines.
Right.
And it's really important to be authentically living. Like, to be an iconographer is a vocation. It's not like you're ordained an iconographer, but it definitely comes with responsibilities. Do I always live up to those? No. Do I always say my prayer rule? No. But that's the ideal, and that's what you're supposed to struggle for, right? As far as training under somebody, that's definitely something you should do. I didn't do that because it just wasn't available. We live in America, and there was nobody around me doing it at a professional level, and that's sort of what I wanted to do. So, yeah, I mean, I can go into it. I could literally spend the rest of this podcast, but I'll leave it there. If anybody's interested in this and talking about this more, they're always free to email me, I guess. So
okay. Well, I would kind of liken it to, tell me if you think this, two analogies. One would be music. The music you hear, depending on what kind of church you go to, what jurisdiction, even within America, you may have a quiet choir singing more, I don't know, kind of like ethereal music, where one will be like, making a joyful noise, super loud. And then of course you have all the different kinds of hymns. And within America, there's the tonus Americanus of the hymn to the Theotokos, which I think is beautiful. And a lot of people think that is, anathema or whatever. And it's gorgeous. And you'll hear it in some places and not others. And how the choir director picks out all the different, he has the, I guess, the power or whatever, or the discernment to pick out what he thinks is going to work for that day. So it's going to be the same hymns, but sung differently and sound differently depending on who it goes through. And I find that so fascinating, because right now I'm a member of a mission and we travel around a lot, because sometimes our mission isn't having services. So I'm always listening to the choir and how different they are, even singing the same hymns within a couple state radius of each other.
Yeah.
So would that be kind of a good analogy, like to the iconographer?
It's definitely a good analogy. So there's an iconographer in America who years and years ago I wrote to, and I asked him something, and I showed him some of my iconography. And people will usually, do this and say, bravo, oh, you're so great, and as an artist, especially an iconographer, that's something you have to block out. It's nice to know people enjoy what you do and that you're skilled at what you do, but at the same time, that's where it stops. You have to immediately get that out of your mind, because that's not the point. The point isn't to be good at painting iconography or to wow people for the dopamine hits. That's not the point. You're offering a service to the church as a whole, not just the clergy, not just to the lay people, to everyone, and more so to God. You're multiplying your talents, as you would say. But anyway, I sent this email to this iconographer, who's a very accomplished iconographer. I won't mention his name, so I don't want to put him on blast. But the message he sent back to me was brutal. It was really, dare I say, rude and blunt. But it's those sorts of, that sort of is the kind of criticism you remember, and is usually the kind of criticism you need to hear. Part of it part of it is because of his Slavic background, and Slavs tend to be a little more just straightforward. At the time, I didn't really know that as much. Now I'm used to it, being around so much. They tell you what they think, and they're not meaning to offend you, but they'll just tell you you need to lose weight, or you look this way, or I don't like that you did this, or whatever. So that's part of it. But what he said to me has always stuck with me, and it's sort of helped guide how I view iconography. And I had sent him, I'd done copies of all these, like, if you use an icon for reference, basically when you're painting, you don't just make it up out of your head. You can, but generally you want to have an icon that's already been painted as your reference, and that's what we call a prototype or a model. And so I forget what I sent him, but I did these pretty close copies of, like, the Theotokos and St. Anthony the Great or whatever. And this was his response. He said, well, okay, we now see that you copied these, and you've totally missed the point of painting an icon. He said the people that are buying these from you would be better off to buy a printed reproduction of the original than this second-rate copy. And when I read that, I was like, okay, they'd be better off. He then went on to explain that if you don't understand what I'm saying to you, and if you don't understand why this is the case, then you need to reevaluate why you're painting iconography. And I just thought he was being a jerk, and I was like, man, that sucks. That's pretty rough, because he's a really good icon painter. And time goes by, and I get connected with my Serbian friend, and I told him about it because it stuck with me. And he sort of broke it down for me, and he said, yeah, I don't know. This is what he said. He went, yeah, I don't know if I would say it that way to you, but yeah, he's kind of right. We are supposed, as iconographers, it's our duty to immerse ourselves in the icons and the tradition of the past, because it's within those boundaries that we work. However, we're not supposed to just rote copy.
Yeah.
Because the old masters didn't do that. We're supposed to keep the tradition alive and rejuvenated, but within the boundaries of a tradition. And I think a lot of modern people have no concept of how to do that. The Japanese are really good at that, because their entire cultural structure is sort of set up that way. I don't know if it's, I don't want to keep dunking on the West or America, but I think that's been lost a lot. And so anyway, what I was missing at the beginning was that you're not supposed to just be a copy machine. Now, there's a lot of people that do that, and that's fine, and there's a place for that. But to really serve the church and to really multiply your talents in the biblical context, you are supposed to pour yourself into it in the context of the tradition and see what God inspires you to do and to create. Okay. And you're supposed to be creating and doing something new and fresh. Look at, do you know who Archimandrite Xenon is? Ever heard of him?
Mm-mm.
I'll send you some stuff on Twitter or whatever, message you some stuff. He is a classic example of a contemporary iconographer who is sort of doing something new within the bounds of a tradition, or within the bounds of a specific iconographic tradition. Mm-hmm. Russia is, in my opinion, the hot spot of where this is happening right now. They're building all these churches and doing all this amazing stuff, but that's a good way to see what I'm talking about as far as creativity within a tradition, because all their churches have all these different styles and schools of iconography, but it's all within the context of their iconographic traditions. And now I'm just speaking purely from an artistic position here with iconography. I'm not speaking about the theology or the symbology or any of that stuff. That's a whole other can of worms. That maybe at another time we can chat about that. But as far as just from like a technical aspect of painting an icon and doing it reverently, that's sort of what I'm talking about. So
yeah, send me that link and I'll put it in the show notes. I would like
to check
absolutely. That out. And I think the training thing is interesting, because it's one of those things that in Orthodoxy, we want people to go to seminary. They do their due diligence there, and then they become priests. But there are plenty of priests today, very good priests, who did not go to seminary. They either did something in some Protestant vein and did some kind of training there, and then they were able to come in, or they were a Catholic priest and they came over. So yes, that's, maybe like a formula that works and is good, but it's not super binding, and that you have to do that. And that's one of the things I love about Orthodoxy. There's rules, but there's wiggle room with stuff, because
well, and we sort of have America here as Orthodox in the West. We sort of have to do things oh man, I don't,
Yeah.
even if
Word
I
it
want to say it,
carefully.
we got to do things our way, kind of like we don't have the same resources, I should say, as like you can go study iconography at a university in St. Petersburg, or there's tons and tons of iconography schools. But in America, you can't really do that. So just to shill for a little bit, I've been talking about this for a while, but I'm mine and my Serbian buddy, one of my passions and one of his passions is building an Orthodox iconography guild or community or scene. I guess scene is a terrible word, but a community in America that can serve the churches in America so that we can source from our own people and not constantly be pulling from the old country. Nothing wrong with that, but Orthodoxy is exploding. If you can't see that Orthodoxy is growing, you just haven't been paying attention. Right. It's exploding. And I think it's really important that we emphasize pulling from our own, here in the States. And so in the future here, I'm going to be doing some teaching. So that's kind of on the back burner right now, but it's definitely something I'd like to do. So I've talked to a few other iconographers. We're trying to change that so that there's a reputable way for people to learn how to do this. Right. And also to cut through, there's a lot of woo, you know what that word means? Woo.
A lot of what?
Woo. It just a lot of like, I don't know. I don't want to say mythology, but there's just a lot of things you hear about iconography. People almost approach it like it's a role-playing game or like a martial art, like you level up, like, you know what I mean? Like there's different, like, once I paint this icon, I'll be at this level. It's not like that at all.
Interesting.
And I think I'm really into helping people to see past some of that stuff, because there's been several people who have approached me that have been amazing artists that have wanted to paint iconography that haven't, because they've just been they've not wanted to be irreverent, which I think is great, to be honest. But I had the same attitude too, but luckily I'd met a very nice Russian gentleman who's now a monk, who disabused me of some of the things that I learned from the nice old ladies at my parish, you know what I mean? Someone in Russia was like, oh, that's just not true. So anyway.
Yeah, that's great. And that totally appeals to me, what you were just saying on drawing from what is here, right?
Right.
The talented people, very localist, very much give people something productive to do for the church to honor God. I mean, there are people really, people who are already interested in Orthodoxy or are already Orthodox and just want to do something that, they may work a 40-hour-a-week job that they just hate, but they want to do something, even if it's not their main job, to really honor God and use their talents. And I think that's awesome. I hope you do that. And if you get that going, I will help you promote it any way I can in my small little way. Okay, so modern art. Let's talk about that for a second. Okay, it's wildly revolutionary and subversive and ugly and, whatever. It's not pretty to look at. So which came first? Did the degraded culture happen and then art was a consequence, or was it the opposite? Did art affect society, or was it both?
Well,
the chicken or the egg?
Yeah, a caveat: I'm an artist and not a philosopher. I mean, I've read quite a bit, but I'm definitely not Dr. Clark Carlton. Definitely not. So yeah, I mean, a lot of this stuff is, some of it's my opinion, most of it's my opinion, but I think it's sort of a both and Father Seraphim Rose sort of brushes on this a little bit in, I think, his Orthodox Survival course, where he successfully dissects how we got from where we were, or an idealized version of where we were, to where we are today. I think the mistake comes when people try to boil it down to this one thing or one path. I think what we're dealing with isn't like this point A to point B sort of degeneration. I think it's been this like octopus of demonic, hellscape, whatever you want to call it.
The Leviathan, right?
The Leviathan, exactly. The Leviathan. But I think it's sort of a both and. I think that, especially as an Orthodox Christian and more of a traditionalist, I guess you could say, I'm not a materialist, so I don't believe that things just happen because they happen. I don't believe that like it's just dominoes and God's playing, what is it? Yeah, God's playing dice or something like that. Like, I don't believe that. I think that there are very real spiritual forces that drive society, the prince of the power of the air, whatever you want to say. And so I think it's very telling, and it makes it quite evident that that's the case when you look at how everything has sort of degenerated almost in tandem. So you have modern art, but look at trends in philosophy and politics and whatever is sociology, whatever you want to say, in the academy in general. You see these areas that these, I guess you could say, our priestly class, the thinkers in our society, you see the direction that they go and that they're influenced, and art sort of goes in the same direction. I don't know, I haven't really done this like in-depth study of modern art and how it got from here to there. I do really, I mean, it's very obvious that if you know anything about art, and especially modern art, it's in fact, a good example of this is, have you ever heard of that podcast Martyr Made?
Yeah, you told me about it.
Okay, yeah, because I've been shilling it.
Are you an affiliate? Are you getting a kickback?
No, I'm just an annoying fanboy. No, I really, really like that podcast a lot. It's incredible. And I'm a subscriber to his on Substack, and he's going through, I forget the name of the book. It's that new biography of Stalin. And he's going through the book. And he brings up the parallel between like the Dadaist movement back in the day, around that same time, and how it sort of rose at the same time as Bolshevism, right. Or shortly thereafter, and how a lot of the people that were involved in that were also involved in Bolshevism. They were also involved in the same sort of goings on as what was going on during the revolution. So
right, the intelligentsia kind of with their fingers and everything. Yeah, exactly.
And that it's almost like they shared they were plugged into the same main arterial of degeneracy, essentially. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't know what came first. I just think it all happened at once,
right?
And I didn't really put those puzzle pieces together until Father Seraphim Rose is someone who, right when you come into the church, you read him and he blows your mind, because he's almost like a doctor, and he is, if you have sort of the malaise of modernity hanging over you, Father Seraphim Rose is someone who will correctly diagnose what's going on and how it affects you and how it has affected you in some way. He has the connection to like all the perennialists, like I'd heard of them before I'd gotten involved or heard anything about edgy politics. Okay. And I heard of that kind of stuff through Father Seraphim Rose. And so when you first come into the church, if you come from our side of the tracks, you're definitely exposed to him. I mean, Keith Woods did a video on the book Nihilism, So, you read Father Seraphim Rose, and then you kind of read other stuff, but I found that after you've been Orthodox a while, if you come back to Father Seraphim, he's definitely a gift that keeps on giving, because you will really, some of the things you've internalized now being Orthodox, you'll really be able to understand a little more. Like I've read his biography multiple times, and there's so many things that stand out to me now in the context of what's going on now, and also sort of my ideological lens that I'm sort of seeing the world through now in some ways. Father Seraphim's always sort of like an editor, or someone who I can run things by, I guess, if I'm thinking them. I don't know if that makes sense, but and so if you read them again, like if you go through the Orthodox Survival Course again after being Orthodox for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, it'll make the world will make a lot more sense. And so when he talks about I don't know what chapter or what part of it is, but he sort of connects everything to like this sort of revolution, all the revolutions that happened, and liberalism in general, and he tries to connect art to a lot of that stuff. And he would basically I don't want to say he, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but that whole mentality would basically say that all of this started with the Catholic Church and scholasticism, like it has its roots all the way back there. I think that's true to one degree or another, but I don't think that where we've ended up with art and culture and science and everything, I don't think that it wasn't an inevitable place.
Right.
You know, I don't think that that's the case. What I think is that all these things happen in tandem, and they're all driven spiritually. Every single bit of this is driven spiritually, and until people really grasp that, I think that that's why within, I guess you could say, the dissident right, I think that's why there's so many different rabbit trails and so many people grasping at straws and having these grand narratives about whatever group here did this. You know, there's all these theories and ideas, whatever, and there's no real cohesive way out of anything. There's no real diagnosis. Except this is bad, and we know why it's bad, and it sucks, and we're all going to hell in a handbasket, but this is why my subgroup over here thinks this is why this sucks or whatever. And I think that's because a lot of it has to do with there's still a large portion of that group, I'm trying to speak so broadly, that has no spiritual direction. And obviously being Orthodox and being an iconographer and all that, I think Orthodoxy is really the only lens you can see that through. And I'm pretty militant about that. But I don't know. I think that art in general, I'm encouraged to see younger people sort of waking up to the Western spiritual heritage and Western art. I've seen a lot of that I hadn't seen maybe 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Even if it comes in the form of like some Roman statue. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess that's an old meme, but even seeing some of that stuff, people are sort of trying to reach back and blindly grab some sort of art or aesthetic that has substance and contextualize it in their own sphere or whatever. I think that's a really good thing, but they're not really going to be able to find like the life preserver to crawl out of this moat of excrement that we're basically in as a society. That life preserver is Christ. It's the church. It's the Orthodox Church.
Right.
I love my Catholic friends. I love my Baptist buddies or whatever, you know. I paint icons for a lot of Roman Catholics. I have no issue with them, but Orthodoxy is the way out of that. So anyway, I didn't mean to give a sermon, but yeah, I mean, I can't really, I've thought about this quite a bit, and I've noticed that there are similarities in philosophy and art, you know, like certain ideas in I don't know how to put it. I don't know how to verbalize it. There's basically a connection there, but I don't believe it was intentional, is what I'm trying to say. And I think it was spiritually driven.
Yeah. And I would say, on the, our side of the tracks, as you would say, people on the right, which is huge, there's a lot of paganism and good people who consider themselves pagans. And to me, as kind of a big picture person, I see this assault on art and truth, beauty, and goodness as always an inversion of Christ. Always. Right. That's always what it is. Take whatever it is. The beautiful girl that went off to college and comes in with the blue hair with piercings and her tongue tattoos. Cut to be and tattoos and her tongue slit and whatever, just, it is what it is. Or the whole body shaming thing, I'm overweight, I need to lose some pounds, but the whole thing where being overweight and unhealthy and gluttonous is all of a sudden deemed, pretty, and it's not pretty, it's just not, and it's not good for you. And it of course is, feeding into gluttony and all these types of things. So no matter what it is, I see it as an inversion of Christ. So
well, and it's all based on a lie. Like the modern art scene or the contemporary art scene outside of, there's facets of it that are encouraging. There's a huge explode, and I'm talking about secular art here. There's an explosion in contemporary realism and real, getting back to real authentic art. But that being said, there's still a huge market for modern art and all of this like performance art stuff. And it's all just like you were saying about body shaming, or what, I don't know what you're talking about, how we're like, you see the big billboard with the overweight, lady, and we're supposed to think
in her underwear. Nobody wants to buy that.
Like revolting, but we're supposed to think the regime is telling you that that's what beauty is, and you need to believe this. It's the same thing with that, a lot of that garbage modern art. It's like somebody will probably like assassinate me for saying this, like Banksy. I mean, he like tries to be ironic about it, but he makes his living off that crap. All of that whole thing. We're told, maybe I'll leave Banksy out of it. We're told that this is art that matters. This is art with a message. When in reality, you and I both know that it's vapid. It's completely devoid of any meaning or any deeper sort of connection to anything outside of money, clout, and being a pretentious jerk. I mean, that's my whole experience with art in general, outside of the iconography realm, has been generally good, but I don't run in those circles. I have a lot of friends that are tattooers that sort of, they live in bigger areas and they kind of hobnob in those circles. And people will come, and if they hear from someone that you're a big deal or whatever, and you get into some gallery and you can put whatever on the wall and they'll buy it because someone in some type of position of clout authority or whatever said that this is important.
Right.
And there's no real inherent value in it. Like when you look at an icon, or you look at like a beautiful Baroque painting, beauty is transcendent. Beauty isn't something you have to have somebody in authority tell you is beautiful. Yeah. It's just not, it goes past all like constructed human institutions. Beauty is this ineffable thing that is expressed in different ways, maybe in different cultures, but it's all like beautiful women are beautiful in every culture. Mm-hmm. You don't find a tribe well, I take that back. There are, generally, you can go to India or what, and it's the standards of beauty, feminine beauty, are almost the same everywhere, and it's the same with art. Like, you don't need to be told if something's beautiful. Now there's taste. Some people like this, some people don't, whatever. But I just, you can't look at like, you can't look at like a painting by like Rubens or Da Vinci or like, Pansalinos. You can't look at a beautiful monastery that's been painted by him over on Athos or something and say that it's not beautiful, or it doesn't have that resonance within you. Whereas, modern art or whatever, generally you need to be told. Same with popular modern music. Generally, it's the reason it's marketed, because if most people listen to it, there's no inherent beauty in it. It's consumer. This is what is valuable. Open your mouth and we'll cram it down your throat. Right. So yeah, it's the same way in the art world.
Yeah. Have you ever read the book Saving Leonardo? It's by Nancy Pearcey. She's a Protestant, but it's a really good book. It's about 10 or 12 years old. It's a profound book because she takes exactly what we're saying, and she talks about how art specifically, but all media, but really she focuses a lot on art and all the different schools of thought and the subversiveness of the progressive era in the 20th century, and really breaks it down how it's just a weapon of secularism, and I would say nihilism too. Because I would say art should be enduring. You should look at something and is beautiful today and is beautiful in 1,000 years. And I think a lot of modern art does not do that. No. Let's talk about, and by the way, if you can hear my dog, there she is. Can you hear her outside the door? She wants to be a part of the fun. A
little bit. You probably hear my 2-year-old stomping around screaming about Doritos.
That's good. All right. Tell us about your Orthodox conversion story. You had said you were an atheist, you partied. How did you find Orthodoxy?
Well, I went to Catholic school here and there. I grew up nominally Catholic, so it's not, I didn't, it wasn't completely non-contextual or anything when I discovered Orthodox. But I grew up Catholic, and then when I was about 14, maybe 13, I was a freshman in high school, I guess. I met this young man. I had a hard time fitting in high school. I was sort of introvert. I'm still pretty introverted. So, I kind of had a tough go, and I met this kid who was super nice. We ended up becoming good friends, and he invited me to a youth group. And so I went. Long story short, I made a bunch of friends there and went to a church camp, and I had a pretty profound, it was a Pentecostal church camp. I had a pretty profound conversion experience there when I was a teenager. And so for my high school years, I was kind of a cringy DC talk evangelical Christian kid. I wasn't the best evangelical Christian kid who went off to YWAM and missions and all. I didn't do any of that stuff. My family was definitely non-practicing or whatever. It wasn't Christian really. But anyway, I went out, I joined the military, went off and did that. Totally disconnected from my faith at that time. I did a lot of drugs, a lot of partying, a lot of debauchery when I was in the military. And I get out of the military and I sort of start reconnecting with Christianity. And I started tattooing or whatever. And then a couple years into that, I moved to the Seattle area, and I tattooed there for several years and lived there. And in Seattle, there's a church. It's kind of back in the news now because there's some like podcast, some deep dive podcast some guy did. And the church is called Mars Hill. Have you ever heard of that church? Mm-hmm. Mark Driscoll?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the church we went to.
Interesting.
Yeah, and Mark Driscoll appealed to me as a young man because he wasn't this feckless, effeminate, all smile. He wasn't that way. He wasn't just like this corny, cheesy guy. He was a masculine guy. He cussed, which isn't that's a great thing for a pastor to do. But he didn't. I don't know. He was just authentically himself. Now, I'm not placing a value judgment on where he ended up or where the church ended up. That's a whole other can of worms and another podcast maybe. But it was through Mark Driscoll and my time at Mars Hill in Seattle that I discovered the Reformation. He loved Calvin and Spurgeon and all that. And I discovered that whole thing. And Martin Luther. And so I got really into that. I got really into like R.C. Sproul and, Gerstner and all that stuff. And kind of meandered into that. And then I started, from there, I started reading some philosophy, a little bit of Nietzsche. Just sort of, here and there or whatever. And I always doubted. I always had these really deep-seated doubts. And if anybody's listening that's a former evangelical or is an evangelical, you'll probably relate that there's not really a whole lot of deep substantive apologetics. There are, but it only gets you so far in evangelicalism. And you got William Lane Craig and stuff. I'm not saying that they're unserious people. I'm just saying for me, what I was looking for, Christianity in the context that I experienced it, I knew there was something to it. Like I knew there's got to be something here, but this just isn't. It just never felt like, I never really felt like it was it.
It was part, right? It's kind of like exactly. A bridge, but and then you keep asking questions, and not that your faith has to be all intellectual, but I felt the exact same way, and I think a lot of people do, and that's why there's so many converts to Orthodoxy. Absolutely,
and so I came to a point where I got really frustrated because I felt like no matter how many books I read, no matter what I did, I never really found. That corny U2 song about haven't really found what I'm looking for, which I think Bono wrote that. It was directly, he was writing about his Christian experience, I think. I read that somewhere. But anyway, and so I one day I was just looking at something on the wall, or I don't know, I was just staring out into space, and I realized that I didn't believe in God. I was like, I don't really believe this. I want to believe in God, but I don't really believe in God. And so I decided, okay, well, I'm gonna be an atheist. And when the reality, I have this weird, I guess you could call it an existential crisis. I had this experience where everything that I thought about reality, I realized wasn't true. And I almost had an anxiety attack. It's really, anybody that's had a deconversion or an existential crisis, you know that feeling. And actually, it sounds corny, but I took a couple days off of work. I wasn't in a good place mentally. And I finally calmed down and I realized, well, if there is no God, I guess whatever, I still have to like put food on the table. So, and that started a few years of me not really caring too much about spirituality or Christianity or anything like that. But it was always in the back of my mind. And it was always something that nagged on at me and really bothered me. And then one day I was watching TV and Pope Benedict they were saying something negative about Pope Benedict on the news or something. And I sat there, I just had this moment where I went, I grew up Catholic, and all I know about Roman Catholicism is just what I learned at this church here, this Protestant church, the horror of Babylon and all the, Bible thumpy nonsense you hear at some Protestant churches. And I realized, like, I don't really know anything about this on its own terms. Like, I've never, it's always just been from the, the oppositional point of view. And so I just got online and started digging around and looked up the popes. I didn't really understand what a pope was. And of all places, I was looking on Wikipedia, and it blew my mind when I realized that you could, from Pope Benedict all the way back to the first bishop of Rome, but St. Peter, you can trace back by name. Like that blew my mind, because as someone with just a Protestant, evangelical, loosey-goosey kind of no real historical context, even with exposure to the Reformation and reformers and all that stuff. I wouldn't say a scholarly exposure, but more like a popular, devotional exposure to that stuff. I still had no idea that there were these things called bishops, and that there was a hierarchy and a lineage by name, all that the office has held all the way back. And so I started watching some videos online, and I discovered this was way back when he was just doing videos. He's now Bishop Robert Barron, but I discovered Father Robert Barron. And I started watching some of his very first videos, and he started talking about Aquinas, and just hearing someone speak he spoke with authority. And I knew, listening to that guy, there was just something different about him, the way he was talking and the things he was talking about. They were very serious. And to me, and in my experience, I never really felt that sort of authority or seriousness when I would listen to even someone as serious as like R.C. Sproul, great intellect, but I just never really got that. And I did from Father Robert Barron. And so from there, I discovered that there's, as a Protestant, you hear that, everyone leaves the horror of Babylon and everyone leaves the Catholic Church to become a Baptist. Well, the dirty little secret is that's a two-way street. There's a ton of people that leave all of these denominations that go to the Catholic Church. Mm-hmm. And I had no idea. And that absolutely blew my mind. And then inside of me, I realized I was raised Catholic. So I got a couple books. I started reading about it. I watched a ton of videos. I discovered one of the things that Catholics do really, really well in Western society over here in the West is they do apologetics really well. They have all these apostolates that sort of have a flavor for every caste in society. There's some Catholic apostolate that you can connect to. I mean, there's like Q boomer Catholic YouTube channels. There's a ton of that stuff. So I found some really great resources and connected with that. Well, through my reading, I discovered this little thing called the Orthodox Church. And, I did some digging around online and discovered that, wow, people leave evangelicalism for Orthodoxy. And then, I don't know, like I started watching.
Had you heard of it?
Yeah, I mean, I'd heard of it for sure, but it was just weird,
Yeah.
Like it was whatever. Like it just like I think a lot of people, it's just not, it just didn't really, because my experience was Catholic, and Catholic apologetics, they really are good at like driving home. No, this is like, because they do have the history to back it up. I mean, and a lot of really serious people end up Catholic, So, but anyway, I found there was a church over where I lived. And the whole church had become Orthodox. They were evangelical, and
a mass conversion.
Yeah, it was a long
amazing.
time ago.
Yeah,
like I thought Peter Gilchrist came in. They were kind of part of that group, the evangelical. And I went to a liturgy, and it was like the weirdest thing I'd ever seen. It was bizarre. I didn't know what was going on. But the one thing that stuck out is like, these aren't weirdos. Normal people. Like they came up to me and was like, hey, what's up? You know, I felt like I was like a Protestant church. But they were doing and I saw the iconography and like, it was just so weird, but I didn't know what was going on. I thought it was cool. I didn't really go around and talk because I don't really do that. I'm not really, it takes a lot for me to like start talking to a stranger. So anyway, I didn't really stick around. So I left, but that was always in my mind, you know, there was this, but I continued on the Catholic path because I was already Catholic, you know? And so I met with a priest. All I had to do was confession and I was back. There was no like, and so I did that and I ended up just becoming Catholic again. We moved to where we are now from the Seattle area. And I ended up, the rector, who's still a good friend of mine, said, hey, you should probably do RCIA. You've been away from the church for a while. So, and if you're listening, you don't know what RCIA is. It's like the rite of Christian initiation for adults. It's basically catechesis for converts or people marrying, you know, Catholics or whatever. So I did that. I asked the transitional deacon, transitional in the way of not transgender, transitional in the way of, in the Roman Catholic Church, when you are going to be ordained a priest, since they're celibate, there is a period of time where you're a deacon, and they just call that the transitional diaconate. And he was the one teaching the class, and I annoyed him with all of my questions. Most of the people in the class were just there because they're getting married. Like it was like me and one other guy that was like spurging out about like, well, in the catechism it says this, and why aren't you? You know, I was that guy. So yeah, so I ended up coming back to the Catholic Church, and I stayed Catholic for a while, but I still had that feeling that this is just something's not right. And I couldn't put my finger on it. And I still had Orthodoxy in the back of my mind this whole time. Orthodoxy always stuck out as something very serious. That's the best word I can describe it. And no offense to anyone who's Catholic, but like I said, I have nothing negative to say about it because that's not my vocation. I'm not a priest. I'm not Father Peter Hares, you know, like that's his thing. It's not for me to sit and say anything bad about the Catholic Church. That's just not my place. Personally, though, my experience was that it did not have the seriousness that I was looking for. The all-encompassing, this is it. This is the ground of reality. It did not possess that. I checked out a few Latin masses. I frankly just couldn't gel with the culture. I just thought it was weird. And at the time, I know it's a little different now, but at the time I just wasn't treated nicely. I know that sounds like kind of weak of me, but it was like, I can't bring my family here if everybody here is like kind of combative. They really had like a bunker mentality the couple times I went, which I understand. I get it. I know what's going on in the Catholic Church, but at the time it wasn't, you didn't have Taylor Marshall like you do now. You know, it was this was like a decade ago. It was still pretty fringe then. So I just didn't get it. So that wasn't an option. And I tried that, you know, I went to we have a Byzantine Catholic parish here. It just didn't, I don't know. And so one day I went, you know, I'm just going to do it. And I went to the Greek Orthodox Church here in the area I live in. And I think I went to like a weekday liturgy, and I stayed after and had coffee downstairs with the priest and his wife and a couple of the people that stayed. And he was just super cool. We just chatted. It was very casual. And he handed me a book. It was The Orthodox Way by Metropolitan Callistos. And I read most of it. It wasn't like this aha moment reading it. It was definitely awesome, but it was cool. And I remember I came back again and he was like, you know, there's another parish in town that I think you should check out. And I don't think it wasn't because he didn't want me there. He just said, you know, I think you would probably really fit in. You can stay here, but I think you really click with this priest. And so I went there. It was an Antiochian parish, and I did. And
that's a really awesome priest to do that. A lot of priests would not do that.
Yeah. His name's Father Stephen Supica. He's a legend around here.
That's awesome.
He's the picture. He was the retired Greek priest from here. He's just like the picture of long suffering and committed. Like he was at that church for so long, but him and his wife are still there, you know, every day. Like him and his wife are just incredible people. But yeah, it talk about not having any pride or, you know, in the negative sense, not having any vaingloriousness about converts. Like he sent me where I would fit best, and he was right. So anyway, I went to this parish, and I connected with the priest and the family there. And inevitably, you know, it's a long story I don't want to get into, but there was Orthodoxy is Orthodoxy, and there was some issues, cross-jurisdictional scandals, and this was a long time ago, but all is well now. But we inevitably left that parish, and I won't go into it, but anyway, I still value what we got from that priest in that parish. So that's basically how I became Orthodox. It was a very long road, but I didn't really shake my atheistic tendencies. Like I always tell people, atheism or unbelief is sort of my natural setting. You know, like that's like, not so much anymore, but for a very long time, I had this very like materialist view that I couldn't shake. And I think it's because I'm sort of a pessimist. Mm-hmm. And I always sort of had this like, there's no way this is true. It's all nice and I'm going to believe it, but right. There's really no way. And so when I encounter people that are atheist or agnostic or whatever, I'm like, yeah, I was up until very recently, I was still an agnostic. I still am in many ways. I don't think you're ever cured of that. And I think it's a thorn in your side. You just sort of have to struggle with and just carry. That's literally a cross you have to carry. But if you don't, what I'm saying is you don't have to like have this like Damascus moment where you fall off the horse and you just believe, you know, like that's not required of you. So I encourage people
that's a Protestant view, which is something my husband and I struggled with, you know, where it's absolutely. Like, yes, you become a new person, right? But one of the things I love about Orthodoxy is it's a long road, you know, and right. You can fall off the road down into the ditch and get back on. And, you know, there's always second chances, but that it wasn't, you know, because we changed when we became Christians in our Protestantism back in the day, but that was always something that was so hard for us. It's like, we're different, we're changed, we're better, we want to be better, but we still suck so much all the time, you know? And it's like, Orthodox is like, yeah, you're going to suck sometimes because you're an athlete. You have to be a spiritual athlete. And I really love that.
Right. Right. Yeah. That's one aspect that I think I worked through that by like, if you are agnostic or an unbeliever, Orthodoxy is the best place for you because there are I call them like hints at transcendence. You know, we have mirror streaming icons. We have all these things that God blesses us with that are very easy to ignore if you're not in the church or paying attention. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. I mean, I think that if you have those tendencies, Orthodoxy is the best place to be because there's all the intellectual stuff, and that's a well that will never run dry. Right. You 10 lifetimes you won't reach the bottom. But for me personally, I think I've read Everyday Saints like 20 times. Mm-hmm. That book's probably my favorite. Me and like millions of people in Russia. That book very much helped me. And it's from an unlikely place too, because it's not like this big philosophical tome, you know, where it explains it's not. It doesn't explain the secrets of the universe. It's just that book has an authority when you read it. But it's so conversational and so matter of fact. You see what living an Orthodox life on the church's terms, mm-hmm. and not the terms that an Orthodox academic might, you know, not all these like, I'm Orthodox, but this, you know, Orthodoxy is an ideology, basically. No, right. If you live Orthodoxy on the church's terms, you're not going to do it right. Nobody does. Right. But it's about coming to it with humility, and that's everything in Orthodoxy. Right. Fasting, everything. It's like you're never going to really do it right. This, you know, and even when you are doing it right, you're going to think you're not doing it right. Right. That's part of the payoff, really. So anyone I know that's an unbeliever or whatever, I always show Orthodoxy because I'm like, you you will find what you're looking for here, because this is the fullness of what Christ intended in his church. And there really is nothing else outside of it. About like politics, I struggled with politics. I don't know if you were going to go here, but
yeah, it was going to be my next question. So go for
politics.
it. Yeah.
Not many years ago, probably around 2014, I discovered, I think it was 2014. It was a long time ago. I discovered a podcast called Vanguard, and it's when Richard Spencer was actually doing valuable work, in my opinion. I discovered Jonathan Bowden, all these incredible, really right-wing thinkers through that and through him. And anyway, yeah, I really, it opened up a whole new world of political thought and a way of seeing the world that I always it was always how I saw the world, but I didn't know that. It was a way, the alt-right used to be this umbrella, this very large umbrella of sort of anyone that didn't fall within the like George W. Bush conservative thing. It wasn't this like pejorative thing where it wasn't this like label of you're an anti-Semitic Nazi. Like it became that scarlet letter because it was weaponized by Hillary Clinton, and those idiots, they that's all they can do is just create canards and brand people with it and demonize and destroy. That's all those, they're literally demonic. That's all they do is destroy. So obviously that's what happened to it. But back then, when I discovered that whole sphere, it was very encouraging because I felt like I gave myself permission to work through some of those things. And I was exposed to a lot of taboo topics that I wanted to think about. And I've talked about with some people, but you're just not allowed to talk about those things. It's like those unspoken things that everyone knows, but you're just, especially at that time. Now things are loosened up. I think so many people have been doxxed and gone after, and they've yelled Nazi at so many people that it just doesn't really hit like it used to. And so, I mean, when I hear like someone saying forgive me, Father John Whiteford is a Nazi, I almost like choke laughing.
Yeah.
Like they throw this term out at anyone who doesn't like strictly align with whatever regime ideology is. But anyway, yeah. So long story short, I won't say that I was involved. I was never involved with it. I don't even know what that means. I was involved with the alt-right. Like I wasn't a speaker. I wasn't a thinker. I wasn't making podcasts. I was just aware of it.
Right.
And I was exposed to it, and I never really aligned myself. That's my ideology, because I don't believe in ideology, I guess. I'm Orthodox, but it's interesting stuff. And I find myself agreeing with a lot of what was going on then. Now, what did it become? I think it lived up to the demonization, unfortunately. I think it became this like circus of stupidity and people looking for celebrity, and they sort of willingly put on the villain mask, Mm-hmm. And you have all these people who, I think one of the websites that you're hosted on is the Identity Dixie website. Mm-hmm. And that specific podcast, is it? I feel so stupid. Is that the name of the podcast? Identity
Rebel
Dixie?
Yell. Rebel Yell.
Yeah. There was an episode a couple months ago where he was talking. He sort of did like a post-mortem of the alt-right. And I think
Rufus.
Yeah, I think he nailed it, And I have a very similar experience. I wasn't involved in it like he was or is or whatever, but I have a very similar outlook on it. These people took something that had energy and vibrance to it, and because of their narcissism, not all of them, but a lot of them, because of their narcissism, they willingly became the villains that the left wanted. And a lot of the people that stayed and still claimed that moniker then went off in these directions where they hyper-focused on these, frankly, just really divisive subtopics and made those the most important thing.
Yeah.
or the thing that like is the end all be all, like this is where the problem lies. And it's just like, there's no nuance. Anyway, it became the caricature that it was presented, you know, and by the time Charlottesville rolled around, I had already pieced out, you know, as far as identifying with any of that. So, but you know, a lot of you can't really, I hate the term red pill because it's just it's so overused and like used out of context. And, you know, like Candace Owens uses red pill, you know, it's just so dumb now, but it's like it's an artifact now that people constantly use to describe whatever. But once you take that pill, like you can't unsee a lot of this stuff. The problem is that you need to, once you consume that pill, it takes a long time to process the side effects. It's like literally like taking a medication. There are side effects, and it takes a long time to habituate yourself to this red pill and work out some of the side effects. And a lot of the people that I guess died a death of credibility or whatever, became pariahs, they didn't know how to mitigate those side effects, I think. And so, I think that was one of the biggest problems. And anyone that had any sense abandoned the title and walked away. Like Ramsey Paul walked away. Yeah. You know what I mean? A lot of people that I still respect walked away. Other people embraced it. And like I said, it was a kamikaze dive all the way to the end. Where are they now, you know? Making podcasts about the Jews, you know, like just hyper focusing on stuff. It's just so dumb. But
well, and they would say, you know, we as Christians, you know, we're part of the problem because they say horrible things about Christ, you know, Jew on a stick or whatever they say, you know, and it's that would be my thing, that's what they're missing is they even the ones who aren't completely, you know, volatile or whatever, or, you know, vehemently hyper focused on one thing, they're missing the big picture. All the things that they say are being destroyed, it's because of the inversion. Again, I see it all through its good and evil, and there's demons abounding, and the demons aren't abounding because of some ideology. They're abounding because they hate Christ, right? Yeah. So they want to destroy the family and civilization and all those things because they hate God, the demons.
Right. And that has a lot to do with it too. I didn't really talk about that, but it's like you're trying to solve. It's just I'm speaking about it like it's just this one group of people that are the alt-right. Even now, there's like, I guess it is a pretty narrow group of people that identify with alt-right still. And I don't know any of those people. I don't have any like animosity. It's just, I just don't pay attention to it anymore, to be honest.
Well, and a lot of them have become kind of left, you know, they're like, oh, you got to forget about the gay thing. Oh, you got to forget about this thing, you know, and I'm like, it's kind of part of the package deal, you know? So I find it odd that some of them are willing to bend on all that kind of thing when they're supposedly fighting for, you know, Western civilization and stuff. It's just all very confusing and odd. And bizarre.
And I'm definitely not a civic nationalist. I'm an Orthodox Christian, but I also, as red-pilled as I was on all of these things, these topics that shall not be named, I got annoyed with the very simplistic narratives about race, because it's like, that's not my experience, you know, like that's a touchy subject, but like you have to, there's like I don't want to say academic there. I don't know how to, you know what I'm trying to say. There's the lived reality there, but it's not this black and white thing. It's, I don't know. I just didn't like a lot of the negativity as far as that went. And speaking in absolute terms, you know, it really got to me after a while. Or like, you know, the problem is Jews. I'm like, okay, yes, I agree. There's something going on there. However, that is like the dumbest way you can put it, because that's a huge group of people. What are we talking about here? Right. You know, can we narrow it down? And when you have someone like E. Michael Jones come along, who has like a coherent explanation for all that without demonizing people, you know, he gets castigated as, you know, he doesn't believe this and that. It's just that whole purity spiral thing. And so,
and sometimes I think those people are so hyper focused on things like that. I think stereotyping is fine. I think humans categorize
Right.
things in their brain, and we prejudge because of our experiences, because of things we see with our eyeballs and our lived experience. But it takes the human aspect out of it too, if you're so hyper focused on it. So sometimes I think
Right.
those people are just freaking feds. Like some dude on
Well-
Gab's calling me a Yankee because I interviewed Communism Kills. And I'm just like, what?
I just think
it's all strange.
I just got really annoyed with it. It seems like a lot of what is now the alt-right has just evolved into like quite literally these Jews did it all conspiracy theories. Like, I'm not going to name names or podcasts or whoever, but it's a bummer, because when I hear that, it's just such a dumb thing to do. It's such a dumb thing to say that it's all. And if you say anything, if you say, well, okay, yeah, there's all these books written about it or whatever, you have all this evidence, but you're connecting these dots here where I just don't see it. And I'm not going to name the books, read the books.
Yeah.
You know, I've been a consumer of that stuff for a very long time. And I just came to the opinion that that's a real simplistic way of seeing the world.
It's also a victim thing too.
It's
Go ahead. I was going to say, it's kind of a victim thing. Let's just say they're right 100%. Okay, what are we all supposed to do around just doing nothing? You know, I mean, to me, it's kind of, you know, how BLM will say, oh, it's all white systemic this and privilege and well, okay, or just.
And if you say, you're a cuck, you're a Zio shill, you're a Jewish, it's like, oh, you just don't get it. It's like you just don't have enough of the information, or you know, it's like it's just so dumb. And I don't know. I just think it's a dead end, I guess you could say.
And you see it in a balanced way, right?
Yeah.
You know, and I would say, go ahead. I'll just
again, you have to have nuance. Yeah. I keep using that word, but you just have to know when you take that red pill, there are side effects, and a lot of people, they just can't deal with those.
Right.
And they go full bore in one direction or another. And I don't know. I mean, I find myself more and more just disconnecting from it.
Yeah.
You know, I had a bunch of lefty Orthodox come after me several years ago over a comment I made on Facebook. And people shared with me screenshots of like clergy maligning me and all this stuff and calling me a Nazi and all this stuff.
Now, wait 1 second. This was going to be one of my last questions.
Oh.
This whole takedown, whatever of you, this attempted takedown, it was just from a comment you made on Facebook.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. Well, it was probably about 5-6 years ago. I made a comment. Somebody wrote, it was before I realized the futility of talking about anything other than my on Facebook. And I think I said, I forget specifically what it was. It was that stupid. It was, or somebody was asking me what my political this and that was. And I said, well, and I think this was my exact words. I said, I'm apolitical. Like, I don't believe in ideology. I don't believe in politics as far as that goes. Like, I'm this, I'm NRX, I'm alt-right, I'm a Republican or a liberal, or like, I just don't believe in that. Like Father Seraphim Rose said, you know, the alleyways of those ideologies are strewn with the corpses of those who tried. And that's a really bad paraphrase of his quote. But those who know the quote will know that quote. It's just a futile endeavor to try and adopt an ideology, because it's just not going to go anywhere without Christ. And so my point was, you know, I'm apolitical because I'm Orthodox. If I wasn't Orthodox, I would probably be beholden to something like monarcho-fascism or something like that. That's where I would be if I wasn't Orthodox. Okay, it's if you're not a complete idiot, you can see that I was saying, hey, I would be beholden to this ideology, but I'm not, because I'm Orthodox. Right. You know, I'm saved from that because I'm Orthodox. It was basically a statement of, hey, thank God I'm Orthodox. Yeah. Well, of course, most of the smooth brain folks who were part of the group of people who, you know, it was blood in the water. And this was a while ago, before the doxing thing was like, when it was actually really effective. And I wrote that comment not thinking anything of it, you know. And a friend of mine texted me these screenshots, and somebody had screenshotted that and shared it in one of those like Facebook Orthodox hipster groups, or there was just comment after comment after comment and blah blah blah, and like, and then somebody else was in another group where there were all these like even more extreme people who were talking about getting me fired and like excommunicated and like all of this stuff, and it like blew my mind. I was like, what, over that? And then I saw clergy. There was a couple priests who I'd done work for. I'd done one guy I did an icon for, another guy I did some illustration work for, and they were, disavowing and all this stuff. And anyway, I mean, it didn't really blow up too bad. I had somebody call the tattoo shop I work at and try to get me fired. And then there's another very well-known iconographer who I won't name, but he's very well-known, extremely well-known, has a very big YouTube channel. And he had a family issue, like family tragedy, something happened in their life. And because he's another iconographer, I decided to raffle off an icon and, whatever, most kind of take care of each other kind of thing. So I did this raffle for him. And he shared it on his Facebook page. And all of these idiots got on this charity like post saying, hey, there's a raffle for me, blah, blah, blah. They got on this charity post and started saying that I'm a Nazi, and they like tagged all these Antifa people to like come find me and assault me on this on another Orthodox Christian's charity page. Like that's the level of self-awareness we're working with here. And I mean, I guess that's, and the level of righteousness, I guess that's way more righteous. But anyway, yeah, and I was like taken aback, and this went on for a few weeks, whatever. There was another gentleman who I don't think he's Orthodox anymore. That's a shocker.
So he's not a gentleman.
He what?
You just called him a gentleman. I'm like, I don't think he's going to be a gentleman.
No, a dude.
A dude.
Yeah, who really like made it his mission to destroy my life. I mean, it didn't really work, Right. I think during 2020, I also had, I had some non-Orthodox folks come after me for posting some like Wrath of Non meme or something, like, on my tattoo page. Like this has happened to me a couple times, and I don't even really hold like, really extreme views. I'm just like, not, I don't know. And I don't preach to people. It's just like, right. Yeah, I used to kind of be into this, but I'm Orthodox, and I don't hide who I am, basically. Right.
Well, it's probably because you haven't disavowed, going on some tear about how, whatever, throwing people under the bus. That's how you get into their good graces. But we know that's
I'm not going to disavow what I believe to people who I've seen say that there's certain clergy talking about like lining up clergy that you and I both know personally. And putting a bullet in their head, and they're supposedly Orthodox Christians. I've seen the screenshot. I'm not going to disavow, because there's nothing immoral about what I believe.
That's right.
They're the, it's like, I'm not doing anything immoral. Why would I disavow what everyone of my demographic has believed up until 40 years ago?
Right.
About reality. You're the one that's immoral, not me.
And I think that. I was going to say, more people are waking up to the whole disavowing thing a little too slowly for my taste, but that it's, why should you cede any moral high ground to these people who literally are immoral,
They're, quite literally immoral. I don't know. It's mind blowing, but I mean, that whole experience wasn't a huge deal. I'm kind of a low, I guess you could say a low value target.
Yeah.
Because I'm not like, I don't know, whatever. I mean, it's happened to me a couple times or whatever, but yeah, it's not like I hold extreme views. That's the thing. It's like I'm maybe one. I mean, this sounds kind of bad, but I'm probably one click to the right of like Tucker Carlson, maybe. Like I'm not really that. I'm not a white national. Not that like I don't really hold extreme views, but anyway, yeah, it's and then after it happened to me, I see it happen to some other people, and it's sort of like it trickles down onto people who maybe hold more mainstream views. And I think because it's happened to so many people, or because people have seen them do it to so many what you would call normie conservatives, I don't think it's it's still effective, but I just don't think it's as effective because everyone's a Nazi now, right?
Right.
You know, everyone's a fascist. You know what I mean? Even when you specifically say I'm not a fascist, you're a fascist. You know what I mean?
Say the pedophiles and the jabbers and all that. Yeah,
for real. Yeah. So I don't know. I think there's a big problem. I don't want to say it's a big problem. I think it could potentially be a big problem in the Orthodox Church with the sort of subversive, like, pardon my language, but shit-lib subversive. I shouldn't have said that. I'm an iconographer, but that's the only other, that's such an apt term for these people. It works. It really is. And that kind of thing, what some of these people are doing fills me with anger, because Orthodoxy is slowly becoming the last refuge. And I get really upset when I see people bringing that stuff into the church or trying to pigeonhole it into the church. Luckily, we have enough clergy who are aware of it. They might not publicly come out and, you know, have the cojones to wear that on their sleeve publicly. We have a few for sure. My spiritual father is one of them. You know, he went from being the darling of all the liberal Orthodox to being this like pariah now because he wouldn't get vaccinated. Yeah. Got dropped by AFR. Like that whole thing. Like, anyway, so yeah, I mean, it really upsets me to see some of the stuff that's going on. But that being said, I don't know. I think enough people are aware of it. And I think there's enough masculinity left in our priesthood where I don't see it getting a lot of traction in most of the jurisdictions, even the ones that I think some people would malign. I know a lot of pretty based Greek priests who don't agree with, in fact, every single Greek priest that I personally know, from to one degree or another, is not a big fan of what, you know, the big boss man has been up to, and some of the things that he's said and the direction that it's going. Most of them aren't down with that. And I'd say all of them, probably the 4 or 5 that I've talked to about the Russia situation are all on the side of Russia, you know? Yeah. So I don't know. That's a whole other topic, but.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you see, okay, we have a lot of converts in America, obviously.
Right.
You know, and then a lot of the subversives who are in the orthosphere, you know, and given money by Fordham and whatever, ADL, SPLC, et cetera, you know, they were like, oh, we have a pipeline. It's always a pipeline, you know, from the right into Orthodoxy, and it's taking over or whatever, you know. And I see that there are many people who are one click to the right of Tucker Carlson, as you would say, realizing, you know, what's going on, and that Orthodoxy is the one true faith. They understand the problems with Catholicism and Protestantism that you and I have lived through some of that. And I see a lot of frustrated people in that vein within Catholicism and Protestantism, one click to the right of Tucker Carlson. So it's not a pipeline, it just makes sense. However, you know, they try to paint it as this, of course, you know, some kind of cabal or whatever, network, you know, and they make graphs about it and all this kind of stuff. So there's just converts. But I would say that the people that stick with Orthodoxy and really see the world through the lens of Orthodoxy, try their best to do that every day on every issue, tend to be to the right. I see the ones that come from the left coming in and trying to change it. You know, we come in and we get humbled, right? We get it. We don't lose our worldview per se. You know, there's probably aspects or whatever, but we still come in and we're the same people, but we're changed in that we maybe aren't so angry about things, or we see that it is the way it is. This is the way the world is. The world is run by Satan and it blows chunks, you know? So, but the leftists come in and they try to change it. It's like they never seem satisfied. I don't know if they're subversives or is they just have hubris. I don't know. Well, I mean, what do you think about that? And of course, I'm broad brushing here. I'm sure there's some people who come from the left and come in and they're lovely people. But generally speaking, is that how you see it?
Yeah, no, again, I think, well, there's 2 aspects to that. I thank God, and I truly believe that I was spared because I'm Orthodox, I was sort of insulated from becoming one of those angry alt-righters.
Yeah.
That we all know.
Mhm.
And the people that I knew in that whole community back in like 2014, 2015, every single one of us that I was friends with personally, every single one of us has either embraced Orthodoxy or traditional Catholicism. Every single one. That's
I mean,
like,
that's a beautiful story.
no, it is.
Yeah.
Like, that's like 8 or 9 guys. Every single one of them has a family, multiple kids, is a normal person, is just trying to live the faith basically, and do the right thing. Every single one of those guys we all have problems and, obviously our struggles and passions and issues, but all of them are normal, upstanding people. So I definitely credit Christ and the church for saving me from a lot of the residual toxicity that comes along with being exposed to very blunt, brutal facts about the real world that our society lies to us about.
Yes.
Okay. That being said, the people, and I'm not talking about like the I don't want to mention any names, but like, I'm not talking about sort of the apolitical center left. I'll just throw it under the bus. Ancient Faith Radio, Orthodox. I'll do whatever. I don't care. I'm not talking about those people, because generally those people I might not agree on a lot of things with them, but generally they're very good people. For the most part, they just don't most of them just don't get it. They don't really have a grasp of what they've imbibed and why it might not be the best thing, but they're not actively seeking to change the faith. Mm-hmm. However, there are people who come into the church who, for whatever reason, think that they need to update, or they need to do this, or they need to make the church this way, or whatever. They read some paper that said that actually, whatever, St. Mark of Ephesus, it didn't really say that. There's all of this like ecumenism and all this stuff and whatever. Like I said, I'm not a theologian or a philosopher, so I don't touch those topics, but a lot of academics do that. And then you have a lot of these extreme people trying to sort of twist and do that. I don't think there's a lot, to be honest. I think that's a minority. There are some, I know personally, some people who are white nationalists who are Orthodox, but they're a minority. I think that in the eyes of these leftist, progressive, liberal, whatever types, they think that all of us are this like fringe minority of extreme far right types. They think that everyone is like that, when in reality, it's like, I think in my experience, there's about an equal dispersion of these extremes. Now, I'm not arguing for like principled centrism. That's not what I mean. What I mean is most people who are living as Orthodox Christians and trying to live the life of the church on the church's terms are not caught up in these like ideological things. We might all have different opinions here and there, but if we're all being Orthodox like we're supposed to be, we're all in the stream together. We don't have to agree on everything, but there's no combativeness, okay? But the church is a church full of people, so there are some extremes in here that they're just not really getting it, Right. And so even though it's a small minority, they're still extremely annoying, and they're still extremely pushy, and they're still extremely spiritually negative, okay? And there's no other way to put it, but it is a demonic assault on the church. And greater minds and greater orders and, greater preachers and homilists than me have gone into this, but I don't necessarily think it's some organized thing or, like some NGO is like funding them to subvert the church here in the States. I mean, maybe the State Department and that Ukraine, like, I don't know, whatever. I don't know about that stuff, but do I think that there's a bunch of like, some coordinated attack on the Orthodox Church by, everyone at Fordham. No, I just think the people at Fordham are just like true believers in whatever nonsense version of Orthodoxy. And I think that all of them are like so painfully arrogant that they're so self-indulgent and painfully arrogant. If you look at some of them on Twitter going at it and like trying to like BTFO other Orthodox, I guess we do it too, but it's different in a way. I don't know. I just don't think it comes from a good place, is what I'm saying. I don't think it comes from an honest place like, well, the church will be better if we accept gay marriage. Like, no, I don't think that's why you're doing it. I think you're doing it because you think that you're better than everyone. You might not know that you think you're better than everyone or more holy or whatever. You just do. You're arrogant. You're more beholden to whatever it is that you drug into the church. And I've said this before about some of the newer converts coming to the church now, viewing Orthodoxy as more of an ideology from sort of a right-wing perspective. They're like, oh, I can be Orthodox. It's based or whatever. And it's like, yeah, it is to a degree, but it's not based. It's not right-wing. Orthodoxy is Orthodoxy.
Yeah.
And once you're Orthodox for a while, you realize, okay, I might hold these right-wing views, but that can't really be the totality of how
Absolutely.
I see reality. Like when I was saying about the race thing earlier, like that's part of the problem I had with the alt-right. It was such like a big thing. And it was so like, I just ended up not really buying into a lot of that. A lot of the like very rigid, like it's always this way. And like, because that's an ideology. And I just haven't had that experience personally. There's some truths to that, but there's also a human element. And I really didn't dig a lot of anyway, I won't go there, but I just didn't dig that. So as far as the leftist thing goes, like I forget her name. There was some like journalist who wrote some stupid book or some like hit piece about, the Nazi infiltration of Orthodoxy in Dixie or something. Who I don't know her name. Some like she had like some hyphenated name. Of
Sarah
course.
McCarty Swartz.
Yeah, that's her. Like I don't know.
She's my
her.
friend.
I know her personally, but like that. Just using.
She hasn't blocked me on Twitter though. She's like one of the only one in that group that hasn't blocked me. So I'm like,
again, I don't know him personally. Like I don't know the motivations, and I don't have any beef, so I don't want to start anything. But I'm just using that as like a type, like writing some expose hit piece. That's just stupid. And it's the more people that come to the church, the more people are going to try to do that, and they're going to do that. And it's just something we need to expect. But again, I'm sort of white-pilled on the fact that I think we have a really good vanguard of solid clergy, and we have some sort of frontline clergy who I think are willing to take the hits. Father John Whiteford, I have nothing but praise for him. I've never really interacted with him, but I highly respect him, big time. Abbot Tikhon, my spiritual father, he's literally like my dad. I love that man. Again, he comes at it from a different angle, but he represents the church faithfully. Father Peter Hares, there's a laundry list in varying degrees of basedness or whatever, men that are rising to the occasion, and they're willing to stand in the gap and take the hits. I mean, and deal with it, and so I'm very encouraged by that. Jay Dyer, you have guys that aren't clergy, that I might not agree with on everything, but Jay is doing good work. Jay takes a lot of crap. Father Deacon Ananias, I can name people doing things in their own way, in their own sphere, that they might have a different avenue and a different approach, but they're not cowards.
Yeah.
And I think that that's what everyone needs to do, is just stop being a coward, stop being a coward. We're not wrong. They are. Yeah. We're not immoral. They are.
Yeah.
That's at the end of the day. I don't care if you're Orthodox, Catholic, whatever. We're not immoral. They are. Christ is king. We're not the ones trying to destroy civilization,
Yes.
And I think we need to stop being so afraid. I don't know. I'm very encouraged by the last couple of years, and I think the summer of 2020, in some ways, I think it helped create that courage, because I think a lot of people said, okay, this is as bad as I was thinking. I remember listening to sermons or homilies by Father John Whiteford around that time. He was the only one on AFR, the only one talking about it in a real context, like the context that we all knew it was happening.
Yeah.
He was the only one saying, hey, this has happened before.
Right.
You ever heard of Russia? I think he's one of the only one. I don't mean to shill and be a fanboy, but I just really respect him for, I know I've seen the screenshots. I know what people say about him. I know the things people have tried to do. I know some of the stuff he's had to deal with. And it's just any priest, it doesn't have to be Father John, any priest that deals with that and publicly decides to take that on, that cross on, I just have nothing but respect for it. So anybody in general.
And I would say the whole, kind of step up, be brave. If that's not your thing, at least support the people who are, because a lot of people are like, oh, it's not edifying or this and that and blah, blah. They have their things. Okay, that's fine. But support the people who are, we're all made differently, the true diversity. Some people are more fighters than others. And that's the one thing that really the left's going to say what they say. The subversives are going to be ridiculous, and it's really fun to make fun of them because that's their pride. You were speaking to that. That's really what they don't like. So I'm kind of, I like it when people take like the Babylon Bee tract and really like mock them. I think that's effective. But there are some people that just have to stand up. And when these moderate people spend their precious time, oh, well, Father so-and-so shouldn't be saying that. That's not edifying. It's like, why don't you spend all your time going after the subversives or just be quiet? That's what gets me, because the left's going to do their wacky thing. It's when these middle of the road people, start lecturing the people who are willing to stand up. It's bizarre.
And lecturing, not even the people who are like out there being active as far as like activism. Like nobody's banner dropping or going and like agitating or it's just like publicly saying, no, I don't agree with that.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, well, your life's ruined then. And then you have all these people who don't. I don't want to say that now because, like I said, I think it's changing. I really do. And I think a lot of people have just lost patience with all of it or are just so fatigued by everything that they're just like, I don't even care anymore, which is a good thing for normality. COVID, I think, was a blessing in some ways because it really woke a lot of people up to how bad things have degenerated, I think. But you're right. It's just, you don't even have to be actively hold some position on this. I'm not a public figure in that way. I don't really hold public political opinion. I do here because we're talking about it, but I don't actively go out and like share my political views because I serve the church as an iconographer. I don't hide what I believe, but it's not my place to preach some economic policy or preach, whatever, or, this political ideology is not Orthodox, because that's not my job. I'm not a priest. I'm an iconographer. If you're even some of these like lefty, Fordham folks, if they commissioned an icon, I did an icon on behalf of, the big dog at Go Arch. You know what I mean? Like, I don't just despise him. He says some strange things I don't agree with, but I generally like to think that people are operating from I don't know. I like to see the good in everyone. So I serve the church as an icon painter, and whatever your, political beliefs are, that's fine. It's not my place to challenge you on that. However, the people that are challenging you or whatever, those of us who aren't in that position, you're right. We need to not either correct them or distance ourselves. I think that's the thing that bothered me the most when those lefty folks came after me, was seeing several clergy just like disavow me and do it in a very like just like really cowardly way.
Yeah.
Not even, and in a way to where like they didn't know that I know that they did that. And I'm just like, what about all that stuff me and you talked about? And then you're gonna like, you're gonna, and you know that I didn't say these things, or that I don't believe these things, but because these people who are making a racket, who are these petulant brats who are literally trying to like destroy what you've devoted your life to, and you're
Yeah.
afraid of that.
Yeah.
You won't stand up for someone and say, wait, I don't think that's really true. That's all you got to do. You won't do that. You'll just say, oh yeah, that is really bad.
That's right.
What? And that's therein lies our problem. But anyway, yeah,
I think you're right that some things are changing, and it may not be a majority of people, and I don't think it has to be. It just has to be strong people who speak the truth. That's really all that matters. So you don't have your website going yet, but you Instagram page, like if people want to see your stuff, maybe contact you.
Well, I have a website. I just got to go in and I got to take care of some things on it. It's just ShayneSwenson.com. It should be back up and running probably in about 2 weeks. I just had a logistical issue, let's say. But
is that the best way for people to contact you if they wanted to get work done? Or
honestly, I do a lot of that through social media, either Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. That's usually what I stay on. I'm not really on anything else.
Do you want me to list all of those? Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I really like your Instagram page, of course, because they're so photocentric. Like if you go to your page, just all the icons you've done, I think I'll list that first because people can really see what you're doing.
That's usually the point of contact. I mean, my website is essentially it's just a reflection of that. That's usually where I do most of it. But I take commissions a few times a year. So if people want to check that out, I definitely do that. So
well, we want this iconography thing to be your only gig, and we want you to be totally prosperous doing it. And I just really hope that happens for you, because as of now, you want it to be a full-time thing, and it's not quite there yet.
Well, it is. See, that's the thing. It is a full-time thing. I essentially work 2 full-time jobs.
Oh, okay.
It is a full-time thing. I paint all day, every day, and then I go tattoo.
Wow.
But yeah, it's we're working. It needs to be. I need to remove myself from the tattoo industry slowly. Yeah. That was the advice of my spiritual father, because I have so many people relying on me. Yeah. But yeah, that's the idea. Not that I have any animus towards tattooing, really. It's just my heart is in iconography. I just love to serve the church in that way. So
yeah, well, I know that will bring you much joy if you could do that more, and not have to work 80 hours a week, I guess. So
that would be nice, but. Gotta do what you gotta do, right?
Gotta do what you gotta do. With 5 kids and a 17-pound cat, you gotta do what you gotta do. All right. Well, Shayne, thank you so much for coming on. It was a pleasure. And just stay safe out there in Washington State, and God bless you. And thank you for sharing so much time with us to tell us about your opinions, and especially about your iconography.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.